Yes, guys, in this video, we're going to explore every AFL club's perfect draft scenario, the type of scenario where your club walks away and feels like they've got the win. This video today is powered by Deakin University, home to the world's #1 sports science school for 3 years running. I'm teaming up with Deakin University in the lead up to this year's draft to bring you even better videos. Okay, so let's get stuck into the video now. I'm going to kick things off with the Brisbane Lions. Now, I am going to do this alphabetically in general, but I'm going to start with the Lions because they illustrate a point for me really nicely here. There really is no jeopardy for Brisbane in this draft. They hold picks 27, 34, 42, 43, 49, and 58, but those picks are all going to go to match bids on Levi Ashcroft and Sam Marshall. But where the Lions will have a big effect on this draft is for the teams that are probably sitting with picks after about the 35 mark, because when Brisbane match the bids on Levi Ashcroft and Sam Marshall, all of those picks that they hold, which is 6 in total, they will drop off, and every team that holds a pick above those picks will start to come down the rungs a little bit. So inadvertently, in a way, Brisbane will shape the draft. Now we'll kick into the Crows next because they do sit alphabetically first. They hold picks 4 and 64 in this draft, as well as 78, which has just come on for the extra list spot. Not sure whether they're going to use that or if they're going to rookie somebody. Now that pick 64 is the one that I'm going to start on here and kind of draw that back to what I just said about Brisbane. Pick 64 will become something like 54 by the time all of those bids drop off for the Lions, also for Gold Coast and for Essendon, who have the bids to match on Kako as well. So 64 looking more like about 54 after all of that happens. Now, the Crows, the main part of their draft is obviously circulated around that pick 4. That's where they're obviously going to get the highest end player. And I think from a needs point of view, the Crows, if you're banking on the fact that they're going to be running Dawson and Curtin through the midfield, they really need somebody that's got beautiful lateral movement and a high degree of speed to offset that a little bit. So I would say in a perfect scenario, the Crows are walking away with one of 3 players at this pick. They've either got to get their hands on the local boy Sid Draper, Jagger Smith is another one that I think would really work well for their needs, and Finn-O'Sullivan. So if the Crows walk away with any of those picks, whichever of those 3 players that they have higher on their list, I think they'll be pretty happy with that. When it comes to pick 64, which will be more like 54, I think they'll either use that pick to take the father-son player in Tyler Welsh, or they'll just be matching a bid if somebody else has a bit of a pop at him as well. Carlton come in next, and they're another team that has a little bit of bid matching to do, but they do hold picks 3 and probably 38 will be still safe for them to use in the open draft. I think with that top pick, similar to Adelaide, they need a bit of pace and killer instinct in that midfield. So it's 2 players here for me. It still comes down to that battle between Finn-O'Sullivan and Sid Draper. I think if the Blues walk away with one of those 2 players at pick 3, they'll be super, super happy. When it comes to that pick 38, it's a little bit more speculative. We don't know if the bid's going to come for Ben Camporeale before that, but there's 2 players I have in mind for the Blues here. They're both key position defenders, and they both have a high degree of talent level. They've slipped a little bit in this draft as other players have come up. They've suffered injuries throughout the season, a bit of a drop in form, but it's Noah Mraz and Harry O'Farrell. So I think if the Blues take either one of those 2 athletic key defenders, they'll be very happy walking away from this draft. Collingwood are certainly not blessed with a good draft hand here, but there is a little bit of a silver lining. That pick 52 and that pick 55 that they hold is probably going to come into the mid-40s. I've sort of calculated roughly that 52 will become 46. So that will just upgrade them a little bit more and be able to get them the player that they really want. Now, you look at their forward line, you look at those key position players, and they really do need to bring someone in there, at least as someone just to develop, sit underneath some of those other players and hopefully have an impact in the next couple of years. I think at pick 46, the first thing that you have to be doing is just looking for a player, a key position player that is, that slipped through the ranks a little bit. There's a large number of key position players in the late 20s, and then there's another couple in the 30s, I think. Now, I think if one of Harry O'Farrell or Noah Mraz slips through to this pick, I think Collingwood have to take that player. I know they're both key defenders, and Collingwood really need that, more of that key forward, but Harry O'Farrell and Mraz are very versatile key position players and very athletic players, so I think they could still fill that void. Other than that, if those 2 players aren't on the board, I think Collingwood would still be pretty rapt to be able to walk away with one of Thomas Sims, Charlie Nichols, or Gabriel Stumpf. So I think with that pick, that 46 that it'll be after the bids are matched, I think it has to be one of those key position players. Then they do have that pick 55, which will similar to the pick 52. It will come into around the 49 mark after the bids are matched. Perhaps if they were able to take someone like a Noah Mraz or a Harry Farrell with that pick 46, maybe they could speculate a little bit on one of Stump for Thomas Sims if they think those players have a lot of upside to help the team in the future as well. The Bombers come in and are one of the most interesting teams when it comes to this draft. What are they going to do after that Kako bid? Picks 28 and 31 will go to the Kako bid. Then they have pick 40, 46, 53, 54, and 65. So there's a lot going on here. Now, I think they can really only be judged, of course, on what they do after that Kako bid. I still think the player that they would be the most keen on to get back into the first round would either be for a big-bodied mid, someone like a Josh Smiley that I mentioned in my mock draft. Now, I don't think that's super realistic on the shape of things. Like, he's probably not going to be still available there after the Kako bid. And then you've got the fact that Essendon are probably going to have to pay a really high price for that pick as well. So I think the more likely one that they're going to come back in for is Joe Berry, another little partner in crime there for Kako. Someone to apply a bit of defensive pressure because Essendon let the ball slip out of that forward 50 way too easily. I think if they were able to get the Kako and Berry party going, this would be a huge hit success for the Bombers in the draft. Then you've got picks 40, 46, and 53, which are all going to come in slightly from the bid matches that I mentioned early. I think one of their big needs are small defenders, and the other thing is just a bit of speed, particularly in the midfield and in the forward half of the ground. Now, I think at pick 40, like given the range, you're starting to have mids dry up there. So you're not going to get that pacey, explosive midfielder that you want with pick 40. So I think you're going to have to go here for the best available, either key forward or medium defender, which is probably two of the things that they do need. I think if you get a player at pick 40, someone like a Tom Sims or one of those defenders like a James Barrett or a Lockie Jakes, I think on best available talent, that's what you'd want to do with pick 40, depending on what's still on the board. Then you go down to pick 46, and by the time that those bids are matched with the Brisbane picks, they have a large number of picks in the 40s there to match those bids. That 46 is going to probably come just about straight after pick 40. So they will be able to speculate a little bit more with what they do, having sort of roughly back-to-back picks there. I think they're going to be looking at a forward half player here, somebody with a bit of dynamism, somebody like Archer Day Wicks, who was at the beginning of the year really touted as a top prospect. He's sort of that medium forward hybrid, but he can run through the midfield. He's a little bit like something like a Jake Stringer, a Cam Zurhaar. He's a little bit smaller than that. Some have even compared him to Isaac Heaney with his marking traits, but he's certainly a powerful sort of mid-forward player. I think he'd be a high upside player that Essendon could sort of speculate on here, and another forward half player to really compound what they're trying to do in this draft to change things. Then there's pick 53, which will also come in a little bit. I think the Bombers could afford to speculate here on a key position player, somebody that's pretty versatile, someone that's a high upside player, and I think Floyd Burmeister could fill this position really well. He's around that pick range on talent, and I don't think Essendon have a specific need for that sort of ruck, forward, key positioning type player with what they already have. But I think he's somebody that they could just bring in on a talent level, and he could, end up, who knows what he's going to be at the top level, but he could either be a target man in the forward half of the ground or that sort of athletic ruck forward as well. At pick 54 then, I reckon they could look for somebody here, and this probably comes down to the marker of if they get Berry or not in that first round. If they don't come back in, I think they could look for a pacey little a smaller forward type player, someone that's creative, and someone like Reece Unwin from the GWV Rebels. I reckon he'd be perfect here, and he's around that pick mark. And then with the last picks, which are probably going to end up being rookie players, or whether they want to go for the NGA prospect in Jaden Newen, but I think they'll take one of Newen, Zach Johnson, or Luca Grego as that sort of medium defender as well. Freo enter the draft, and they have a nice little draft hand here. Picks 14, 30, and 67 are probably the three picks that they'll use. Then you've got 81 and 89, which are really drifting out. I think in a best case scenario here for the Dockers, they're bringing in the enigmatic Joe Berry. I know I've linked him to a lot of teams, but he is just perfect for what the Dockers need right now. They've brought in Shea Bolton to be that kind of forward of centre player, but he's going to run through the midfield a little bit. I think they still need just a little bit more quality in that small forward brigade. You've got Swikowski, you've got Banfield, players like that. But Joe Berry is just really classy, and he can kind of act as that sort of hybridy player too with his aerial ability, just to give them something a little bit more dynamic down there. Then you've got pick 30 coming in, and I think they're still going to be looking for outside run here, the Dockers. I think they could use a secondary wingman on the opposite side to Jeremy Sharp, and I think Christian Moraes would be the perfect player here. He's a high-intensity repeat effort player. He can get up the ground. He's a really good hybrid marking player as well, so someone that can drop a little bit deeper, sort of compete in the air for those defensive contests, and then drift forward and hit the scoreboard as well. Then at pick 67, I think they'll be looking for one of the Western Australian talents that has fallen through. Again, it sort of depends what they do at picks 14 and 30, but the players that I would be looking at here for the Dockers are Cody Ango for sure. Again, he gives that outside run, and he's a really high upside player. And then you also got Hugh Boxall, and we don't really know how high he can potentially go in this draft. If they did want to just bring in somebody else that could play a little bit on the inside but can also play a little bit forward of centre, I think Boxall would be a really nice fit as well. Geelong, I feel like just nothing is being said about the Cats in this draft, but they'll probably end up coming out with a couple of gems like they always do. They got picks 45, 57, 74 and 84. 45 is going to come in a couple of places, of course, like I've said with those bids. So I think the one thing that the Cats really do need is a little bit more creativity in that midfield. They've sort of got a mixture of those explosive players like Dangerfield, who's phasing out. Max Holmes is the natural replacement for him. And then you've got your sort of Tanner Bruin, Jack Bowes type players. So they probably need another sort of engine mid, somebody that can play a little bit forward of the ball as well and be flexible as they bet into that midfield in a high-end team. I think Xavier Ivicic, I know he's from the Geelong Falcons and it's an easy one just to place to them, but he's a pretty perfect player for what they actually need. He doesn't have to come in and play instantly, but we know that he's a guy that can just continuously find the footy and play good midfield minutes. We still don't know about Jai Clark, how he's going to go at the top level ongoing, so I think Ivicic would be a nice one here and around that pick range. Then at 57, I think they can speculate, go a little bit heavier on the key position player, and I think Gabriel Stumpf would be perfect for the Cats. So I think if they, get that creative mid with the first pick, then walk away with a key position forward, the Cats would be pretty happy. Gold Coast Suns are largely irrelevant in this draft, and like the Brisbane Lions, their main contribution to this draft is going to be those picks that are going to fall off and drop everyone in. Once they get Lombard, realistically, they want to just get the hell out of this draft before anyone notices how many gun academy players they're getting. GWS have a sneaky good hand now that Peatling and Cumming and Perryman walked out the door. 15, 16, 21, 37, 56 and 73. I'm not sure how many of those picks they'll use, but we'll have a look at the top ones. Pick 15, I think they want their man in Xavier Lindsay. They've got to hope that he drops through. I don't know if he will, though. I think there's a lot of teams that are hot. St Kilda are up ahead of them, and West Coast are certainly keen, so that's going to be tough. At pick 16, I think there's two players here. One of them's to replace the aging Lockie Whitfield, which would be the Toby Travalia play. He brings a little bit extra than Whitfield with his overhead marking. You've got Cumming, who's gone out the door. They would love to get their hands on a player like this, and I think Luke Trainer would be that perfect defender there at pick 16. So one of Toby Travalia or Trainer there. Then at 21, I'd love to see them go for one of those small forwards. I think they will, and I think this could be Jasper Alger. He could be a little bit of a bolter on the night, and they could go for him. He'd bring that hybrid forward play, ground level and in the air, and I just love him as a player and can definitely see him bolting. If the Giants walked away with 3 of those 4 players in those picks, I think they'd be absolutely wrapped, and then they can match a bid on Logan Smith with one of their later picks, who is that sort of developing ruck as well. It's pretty lean for the Hawks. They hold picks 33, 70 and 75, but they can do something pretty meaningful with that high pick at 33. I think they need more midfield quality. There are rumours that they're going to be going in for a big fish next season, like an LDU, even maybe a Chad Warner if they can entice him down to Melbourne. But with this pick at 33, if you're going for midfield quality, there's not a lot around that area, but one player stands out to me that would work well for the Hawks, and that is Jack O, 194 centimetre, big-bodied marking midfielder. Now, he's a funny one because he doesn't throw his weight around in there for somebody that is that big. He's really clean, really nice with his disposal, really creative, but then you do get that marking prowess. I think if the Hawks wanted to go a little bit different here for somebody else, again in that big-bodied frame, but someone a little bit more physical and a little bit more of a runner, I think they would go for someone like Hamish Davis. I'd probably mark that choice down, just the fact that he's Western Australia. You'd have to get him over and it's a little bit more complicated. Pick 71 here, I think they can have a bit of a punt on Cody Anderson, who is their NGA product. He's a big inside bull. He's got a bit of explosive pace. He's not a great player with ball in hand, but he could come into that midfield and be a bit of a defensive anchor and sort of help the team out in that way. So I can see that one working pretty well for the Hawks. The Dees come in with quality over quantity. Picks 5, picks 9, and then 79 with their list spots available. Those first two I'll focus on here. Now, a perfect scenario for the Dees, I think they grab Harvey Langford at pick 5, and then they see what happens with those other picks, and I think they would want to get their hands on at pick 9, one of the key position players. I like the key position defenders here. I like Alex Tyree or Luke Trainer as the best available options. I think you'd still probably have to give the Dees a tick if they got Harry Armstrong at this pick, but I think Langford and one of Tyree or Trainer would absolutely seal the deal at these picks. North Melbourne hold picks 2, 62, 76, and 86. We'll focus on 2 and 62 pretty much here. I think for pick 2, they either go with the one that they've been chasing all season long, which is Alex Tyree, or if he was to slip through, which I probably don't think will happen, but if he was to slip through, I think Sam Lawler is still an option here for North, particularly with a few rumours rustling around that LDU could be out the door. Sam Lawler is that type of player, so someone that North definitely still could be focusing on. There's probably an outside chance they're still focusing on someone like a Finn O'Sullivan as a bit of a hybrid player too. Then it comes down to 62 for the Kangaroos. What are they going to do here? I think there could still be a couple of key position players that they could have a look at here. One of them is Gabriel Stumpf, who is that highly athletic, high upside key forward. And I think you'd be looking at anyone who fell through the cracks here, someone like a Clancy Dennis or a Thomas Sims, remembering that pick will come in a little bit too. Then with those later picks, I think they're probably going to give a rookie spot there to Rivers Stevens as well. I think this is such an important draft here for Port Adelaide. Picks 13, 29, 36, and 50. It's a pretty darn good hand. I think they need a few things. I'll start with pick 13. I think the best player that they can go for here is one of two, and this is going to come down to really what's available, and then that's going to affect what they do with the rest of the draft. Now, Joe Berry at pick 13 would be a perfect player. Again, they need quality in that small forward ranks. They have drafted heavily in that area, so it is going to come down to how much they back in some of those guys that they've drafted in the last couple of years, but I think Berry is definitely an upgrade on what they've got. The other player here would be Harry Armstrong. If he was to fall through the cracks, I think Port would have to have a go at him at pick 13. At 29, then you've got to look at what you did at pick 13. So I think if you didn't take the key position forward Harry Armstrong, you'd go for someone here like a Cale Guerin, the Western Australian, a big power forward, someone that's a really good runner. He's really athletic and agile and just ticks a lot of boxes. You can even run him through the ruck a little bit. A perfect Charlie Dixon replacement, really. But if you did take Harry Armstrong with that opening pick, I think you're probably not sniffing around a Guerin here, and you're probably going to go for that half-back reinforcement, which is someone like a Harrison Oliver. So if you've got a combination here of Berry, Guerin, Armstrong, Harrison, Oliver, I think you're pretty happy. And then that dictates what you do at pick 36, which has got to be one of Angus Clark or Noah Mraz for me. Now, Angus Clark is the local boy, being South Australian. He's more of your medium interceptor type that's going to run the ball out of defence as well, where Noah Mraz is more of your genuine key position defender, someone very versatile, someone very flexible. So again, it kind of comes into what you did with those key position players up the board. But let's say you ended up with Berry, Guerin, and Angus Clark. I think that is a massive tick. And then you could round this out with a bit of a speculative one at pick 50. You could take Charlie Nichols, who is the local boy, another key position forward there, just to give your stocks a little bit of reinforcement, because I think some of the forwards at Port Adelaide have lacked a bit of competitiveness, and you've brought in Lukosius, who is probably another one that has that same sort of problem. Oh, the Tigers. So many permutations with them. 1, 6, 10, 11, 18, 20, 23, and 24. What are they going to do with these picks? All signs and all the communications coming out of the Tigers is they're going to take them all to the draft. They're not going to trade any picks. We don't know that for sure, but I'm going to go on the basis that we are just staying as is. Now, ideal here for picks 1 and 6. You've got Lawler, you've got Foss, you've got Jagger. I think you've got to just nail 2 of those 3 players there. If you walk away with 2 of those 3, tick, tick, tick. Then picks 10 and 11, I think these are really safety picks in a way. You're mopping up what's kind of slipped through the cracks, and it really depends on what you got at 1 and 6. In the mix here is going to be Murphy Reed, it's going to be Josh Smiley, it's going to be Harvey Langford. Because you've got back-to-back picks here, I think you've got to get one of Reed, Smiley, Langford, and then at 11, you've got to go for Taj Houghton just to give you a little bit more bite, a little bit more pace in the forward half of the ground. Then at pick 18 and 20, that's where your key position players come into play. I think this is where the best value in the draft is for the key position players. I think Armstrong probably ends up going a little bit higher than that, but I don't think Richmond need to make a play for Armstrong. I think at 18 and 20, they go for someone like a Jack Whitlock as the main priority as the key position forward. And then they look at someone that slides. So there's always a potential that someone like a Harry Armstrong slides through to the pick and you just mop him up. The other one is Luke Traynor, and Richmond have the ability with all of these picks to speculate a little bit on Traynor. If he was to slip through to 18 or 20, I think you've got to take him with everything that he offers as a package. Then at picks 20, 23, and 24, this comes down to what you've done previously in the draft as well. I think if you only took Sam Lawler as your big-bodied mid in all of that, you didn't take Smiley as well, I think the first player you've got to look at is Cooper Hines, who's going to be likely available with those picks. If you did go a little bit more heavily on big-bodied mids, you ended up, I don't know, somehow you ended up with Langford and Smiley in that mix. I don't think you'd be taking Cooper Hines. You'd look at some of those agile, smaller players in the forward half of the ground, your Detolis, your Hannafords, your Algers, and definitely with one of those picks, if you only had one key position forward, I would be targeting heavily Jonty Fall as a perfect power forward system type player for the Tigers. What a draft this has turned into for St Kilda. They hold picks 7, 8, 32, 47, and then they've got those two later picks that they can do some stuff with their NGA players. Now at pick 7, it's one of two players for me, and this really comes down to, this is a subjective thing, and ultimately, I think the most likely one is Josh Smiley, but I think you're happy as a Saints fan if you're walking away with either Bo Allen or Josh Smiley. I like Allen a little bit more, but ultimately you're going to be happy as a Saints fan with one of those two players. Pick 8, I think, has to be that forward of centre player. And again, like I said with the Tigers, I think this has to be Taj Houghton. Particularly, I think if you've gone with Smiley with that first pick, you really need to start getting some speed into that team and some like agility, some lateral movement, some mobility. So I think Taj Houghton ticks that box at 8. So one of Allen, Smiley, then Houghton with those first two picks. And of course, this is all depending on whether they keep those picks as well. I think 32 is too high for Cole Hoffman types. So I think they can have a little bit of a go at potentially one of those small forwards. If one of them slip through the cracks, I look at Detoli, I look at Hannaford as being perfect for the Saints, and even Jasper Olga. If one of the New South Wales teams hasn't pounced with one of their early picks, I think Jasper Olga would be a great hybrid play, and not someone that the Saints really have at the moment, that type of player. So I love that. Again, with that pick, I think you're targeting a key forward. If one has fallen through, one of the really high-end ones, someone like one of the Whitlock brothers, a Jonty Fall, I think he would complement Max King really well. Then at 47, you introduce Adrian Cole, or at least the matched bid for Adrian Cole, whatever happens there. And then at 80 and 88, you can do your work with Peckett and Hoffman. The Swans have a bit going on here. 19, 22, 44, probably their main picks. Then they've got 59, 85, 91. So some of those picks will come in a little bit, not the early ones. Now, I think they're the important ones mainly for the Swans, 19 and 22. They've got to get this right. I like some sort of a combination between these two players. So the first pick, I reckon it's either Detoli or Jasper Alga as that small forward type. Then I think with the other one, you either go for Cooper Hines or Tom Gross. So you go for like a genuine small forward with one of the first picks, and then you take one of those more kind of mid-forward, probably more midfield orientated players in Hines and Gross. I think if you got a combination, like say it was Alga Gross, you'd be happy. I think if you got Detoli and Hines, probably the perfect case scenario for the Swans. Then at 44, you're probably matching a bid on the athletic key defender Joel Cochran. And then I'm not sure really what the Swans will do, if anything, with those picks after that. West Coast, they've had their draft kind of turned into a little bit of a nightmare. They've got picks 12, 26, and then a bunch of late ones post 70. 12 and 26, they've just got to do something meaningful with these picks. I think pick 12, given the balance of how their midfield falls, what they've done in the draft in recent years, it's got to be that engine mid. It's got to be the accumulator, the guy that can rack up the footy and just be a mainstay for the likes of Yeo, Reid, Hewitt, those more powerful type players. I think it's got to be one of Murphy Reid or Xavier Lindsay here. I did flirt with Travalia, but given how the midfield balance looks, looking at it a little bit deeper, I think you go with Reid or Lindsay, and particularly Reid if he has fallen through the cracks. I think that'd be a real win given they did trade away that pick 3. Then at pick 26, I like a small forward here because I don't think West Coast really have much at all in the small forward ranks. Ollie Hannaford, Jasper Auger, Jesse Detoli, Tom Gross, one of those players you would be super happy with. I know I've bought those players up for a lot of different clubs, but not everyone's going to get them. Someone's going to get them. I think they'd also be perfect for the Coasters. I like the Dogs draft hand here, 17, 25, 35 and 48. They're going to be able to do plenty with those picks. They're an interesting team because their picks start to fall around a heavy grouping of key forwards, but yet they're a team that they don't want for key forwards or key position players really at all. So I think they want pace. If they can get pace through the midfield, they take it, but then that forward pressure, that rapid sort of speed in the forward half of the ground is something that they want too. Ideally, at pick 17, I think they want Ollie Hannaford or Jesse Detoli, but I think if Luke Traynor was on the board, given the fact that they've moved a player like Ed Richards and Caleb Daniel, Richards in his case into the midfield, Daniel out of the team, I think they do need somebody to run the ball out of defence. I think Luke Traynor could do that for the Dogs. I know he is a bit of a key position player, but I think he'd be one that they'd look for on talent at that pick if he was still available. Hannaford and Detoli would be the other choices for me with that first pick. Then at 25, you look for something that can run through the midfield a little bit. I like Cooper Hines or Tom Gross here, both forward of centre midfielders. Cooper Hines would give you something just a little bit different. I know they like to mess with Bont, move him around a little bit, so Hines could sort of help with adding another big body into that mix. Then at 35, and this comes down to if you didn't take Traynor at that first pick, and he probably won't be available, so we don't have to speculate on that too much. I think then you'd go for your running defender. Harrison Oliver or Angus Clark would be the perfect player to bring in here. If they got some sort of a combination of those players, the Dogs would walk out super, super happy. Pick 48, which will come in a little bit as well, I like another one of those small forward players just to help out with pressure, to help out with ball in hand, to help out with a bit of creativity. I really like Josh Dolan and Reece Unwin here. If you got one of those through the door, along with Jesse Detoli and Ollie Hannaford, what a forward line transformation that would be for the Dogs to go in with that. You know, they have been criticised of being a little bit oversized, so that would really help out the balance a lot. That is a wrap for this fast fire club by club. I hope you could get a bit of a look at what looks like a perfect situation for your club on draft night. I'd like to thank Deakin University here for powering this video. They've been a big help in the lead up to this year's draft, and I thank them again. For everyone watching at home, thank you for watching. I'm getting super, super excited about this year's draft, and I hope you guys are too. That is a wrap, and I'll see you next time.